The refectory fell silent the moment Queen Thessera entered. Not the reverent silence of ceremony, but the sharp, cutting quiet of fear. 600 beings from 14 species froze mid-gesture, mid-breath. Trays clattered. Someone's drink spilled across the metal table, pooling like blood. Thessara's 4 eyes swept the enormous space with mechanical precision. The Krell shifted away first, their chitinous plates scraping against benches, then the Vorens, abandoning half-eaten meals. Within seconds, a circle of empty tables radiated from where she stood, expanding like a ripple of disease. Her translator chirped softly, picking up fragments of whispered words. Plague Queen, the cursed one. Don't breathe near her. She had heard it all before. Thessara moved through the manufactured emptiness, her robes dragging across the polished floor. The diplomatic summit on Station Kepler. 7 had seemed like progress. 15 species gathered to forge trade agreements, share technology, discuss peace. But peace required proximity, and proximity required trust. No one trusted the Varen anymore. Her people had been architects of wonders once. The crystalline spires of Thesval had pierced 3 moons. Verne biotechnology had cured plagues across 7 systems. Then the crimson rot came, a fungal infection that turned Varen skin to ash, that spread through touch, through air, through the smallest particle of shed cells. 90% of her species died in 18 months. The rest became pariahs. Thessara carried no infection. The medical scans proved it. Every delegation had seen the reports, verified by independent labs, confirmed by their own physicians. Clean, sterile, safe. It didn't matter. She selected a table near the observation window, where the stars wheeled silently beyond the reinforced glass. The nearest occupied table was 20 meters away. Standard distance. She had become an expert at measuring isolation. Her meal arrived via automated cart, no server willing to approach. Protein paste and synthesized grains. She ate mechanically, tasting nothing, watching the other delegates cluster together in their comfortable segregation. The Krell ambassador gestured wildly, telling some story. Laughter erupted. Life continued everywhere she wasn't. Excuse me, is this seat taken? The voice was soft, melodic, speaking flawless Varan. A human stood beside her table, tray in hand, expression open and curious. Female, if Thessara remembered the gender markers correctly. Dark skin, darker eyes, hair bound in intricate patterns that suggested both function and artistry. She wore the gray coveralls of the engineering corps, grease staining her sleeves. Every eye in the refectory turned toward them. You should not be here, Thessara said carefully. Her upper hands remained on the table, visible, non-threatening. Your delegation will be displeased. I'm not part of the delegation. I'm Amara Chen, Environmental Systems Engineer. And you didn't answer my question. The seats are empty. That's not what I asked. Something flickered in Thessara's chest, a sensation she'd almost forgotten. Not hope. Something smaller. Possibility. They're not taken, she said quietly. Amara sat down. The refectory's silence shifted quality, becoming charged, dangerous. Thessara watched the other delegates watching them. The Krell ambassador half rose from his seat, mandibles clicking agitation. The Voran contingent leaned together, whispering urgently. You don't know what you're doing, Thessara murmured. I am quarantined, avoided. Your reputation will survive me eating lunch, Amara interrupted. She took a bite of something that looked distressingly artificial and made a face. Though I'm not sure my stomach will. Do you know if they have anything that wasn't processed through a protein recombinator? I would not know. I eat alone. Not today, you don't? Amara pulled out a handheld terminal, fingers flying across the interface with practiced ease. I've been reviewing the station's ventilation schematics. Fascinating work, really. The Varen sections utilize a bioreactive filtration system I've never seen before. The efficiency ratings are incredible. You studied our technology? I study all technology. That's the job. Amara glanced up, and her smile carried genuine warmth. Your people designed the medical bay's air processing, didn't they? The particle capture rate is 0.997. That's not just engineering, that's artistry. No one had called Veron work artistic in 5 years. The crimson rot required absolute contamination control, Thessara heard herself explaining. We learned to filter molecules from atmosphere. It was necessary. It was brilliant. Amara's eyes held no pity, no fear, only professional respect. I've been trying to adapt similar principles to the waste recycling systems. The math gets complicated around the thermal exchange variables, and I wondered... She paused. Would you mind if I asked you some questions, as one engineer to another? 2 security officers lingered near the entrance, speaking urgently into communicators. This will cause problems, Thessara warned. Probably. Amara pushed her tray aside and expanded a holographic schematic between them. But I've got a filtration problem that's been driving me crazy for 3 weeks, and you might be the only person on this station who can help me solve it. So, problems for later. Engineering for now. Deal? Thessara's primary hand reached toward the hologram, then hesitated. You truly do not fear contamination? I read your medical files, all 47 versions that got leaked to the engineering database. Amara's expression hardened slightly. I'm not afraid of verified science. I'm also not afraid of eating lunch with someone who clearly knows her stuff. She rotated the hologram, highlighting a junction point where 3 systems intersected. See this? The condensation keeps backing up into the atmospheric processors. I've recalculated the pressure differential 6 times, but something's still wrong with my assumptions. The Varen sections don't have this problem. What am I missing? At the human who had crossed an invisible battlefield to sit beside her. At the equations that danced in the space between them. Clean and pure and completely unconcerned with politics or prejudice. Her lower hands moved to the controls. Here, she said, and her voice barely shook. You're calculating for standard atmospheric composition, but moisture content varies by species-specific quarters. If you segment the calculations by biological requirements rather than section designations, the Krell ambassador reached their table. His shadow fell across the hologram. Amara didn't look up. Neither did Thessara. They were already deep in the mathematics. The equations bloomed between them like flowers, each calculation branching into new possibilities. Amara's fingers moved in counterpoint to Thessara's, adjusting variables, testing hypotheses. Around them, the refectory remained frozen in scandalized observation. There, Thessara said, isolating the thermal coefficient. The humidity differential creates a pressure cascade. It amplifies through each junction point. Which means, Amara worked backward through the math. We're not solving for steady state. We're solving for oscillation. Her eyes widened. It's a resonance problem. They looked at each other across the holographic display. Amara grinned. You just saved me a month of trial and error. You provided context I lacked. Thessara's secondary hands gestured acknowledgement, a Varen expression of gratitude. The exchange was mutual. Engineer Chen, the human delegation has requested your immediate presence. Amara finally glanced up. Tell them I'm working. This is inappropriate. The Varen are experts in environmental systems that I'm responsible for maintaining. Amara's tone remained pleasant, but something in her posture shifted. Unless you'd prefer the waste processing failures to continue, I can forward you the incident reports. There have been 17 backups in the past month. The ambassador's mandibles clicked uncertainly. Station maintenance was technically neutral ground, outside diplomatic jurisdiction. He looked at Thessara with barely concealed disgust, then back at Amara. You will be reported to your superiors. I usually am. Amara waited until he retreated before turning back to Thessara. Sorry about that. You were saying about the resonance frequencies, but Thessara was studying the human with new attention. Why are you doing this? I told you I needed help with this. Thessara gestured at the empty space surrounding them, the watching crowd, the weight of disapproval pressing down like gravity. Why? Amara was quiet for a moment. She picked up her water container, examined it, set it down. 3 years ago, she said slowly, there was an accident on the Mars colony. Reactor breach. The radiation was spreading fast, and the evacuation shuttles were already full. I was in the engineering bay, 12 levels down, no chance of making it to the surface in time. Her fingers traced patterns on the table's surface. An older engineer named Marcus stayed behind. He rerouted the coolant systems manually, bought us 15 minutes. 15 minutes in an irradiated compartment. He got me and 4 others to an emergency pod. Then he sealed us in and went back to keep the reactor stable until the evacuation finished. Thessara's throat tightened. He died. But 47 people lived. Amara looked up, and her eyes were clear. Marcus taught me that engineering isn't just about systems and equations. It's about seeing what needs fixing and fixing it, no matter what the cost. And right now, What I see is someone being treated like a contaminant when every scanner on this station says she's clean. That's a broken system. One you cannot fix with calculations. But I can start by refusing to participate in the breaking. Amara's smile returned, smaller but somehow stronger. Besides, you're the best environmental systems specialist I've met in 5 years. I'd be an idiot to let politics get in the way of learning from you. Red emergency lights flooded the refectory. The holographic displays flickered and died. The SARS translator erupted with multiple priority alerts simultaneously. All personnel to emergency stations. Atmospheric breach in Sector 7. Repeat, atmospheric breach. The message cut off. Thessera was already moving, her mind automatically cataloging vectors and probabilities. Sector 7 housed the primary life support nexus. A breach there wouldn't just affect one section. It would cascade through the entire station. Amara ran beside her, terminal already active. I'm pulling up the schematics. Sector 7 connects to 43 separate atmospheric zones. If we lose containment, 6,000 inhabitants lose breathable air within 20 minutes. Thessera's legs carried her through the corridors with decades of emergency training. The backup systems cannot compensate for total nexus failure. Security barriers were descending, automated protocols sealing sections to prevent contamination spread. We won't make it through in time, Amara said. The SARS 4 eyes scanned the walls, the ceiling, the infrastructure hidden behind panels. Her people had designed portions of this station. She knew its bones. Maintenance shaft, she said, pointing to a panel nearly invisible against the bulkhead. Varen engineering teams use them during construction. They bypass the security grid. Will it get us there, if we survive the climbing? Amara didn't hesitate. She pried open the panel with a multi-tool, revealing a vertical shaft that dropped into darkness. Emergency lighting flickered far below. After you, the human said. They descended into the mechanical heart of the station. The maintenance shaft was never designed for rapid transit. Thessera's hands found holds where human eyes would see only smooth metal, her fingers recognizing Varen construction patterns by touch. Behind her, Amara climbed with impressive efficiency, her breath coming in controlled bursts. How far? The human called up. 40 meters. The shaft intersects with the primary coolant conduit, which runs adjacent to Sector 7's atmospheric processors. Adjacent isn't inside. The processors require thermal regulation. There will be access ports. Assuming the ports weren't sealed, assuming the breach hadn't compromised the entire infrastructure, assuming they could reach the nexus before catastrophic failure, Thessera climbed faster. They dropped into the conduit tunnel, and the temperature immediately spiked. Heat radiated from massive pipes carrying superheated coolant throughout the station's lower levels.
The air shimmered.
Thessera's translator picked up the high-pitched whine of stressed metal. This way. She moved along the narrow walkway beside the pipes. Everything was familiar. The Varen construction crews had worked here for 18 months, installing the very systems now failing. She knew every junction, every access point, every backup relay. She also knew what a catastrophic breach sounded like. The roar hit them before they rounded the corner. Not an explosion, but the violent scream of atmosphere escaping into vacuum. Through the access port ahead, Thessera could see into the main chamber. The atmospheric processor dominated the space, a cathedral of technology 3 stories tall. It should have been humming with efficient precision. Instead, it was tearing itself apart. A coolant pipe had ruptured, its superheated contents spraying directly onto the processor's primary condenser unit. The metal was buckling under thermal stress, seals failing in sequence. Each failure released more atmosphere, creating a feedback loop of destruction. We need to shut down the coolant flow and stabilize the condenser, Amara shouted over the noise. She was already pulling up emergency protocols on her terminal, but the main controls are on the other side of that. She pointed at the geyser of escaping coolant. Thessera studied the chamber with all 4 eyes simultaneously, processing layers of information. The emergency cutoff is in the sublevel. Manual activation only. How long to get there? The processor will fail in 4. Could we patch the pipe? Amara asked. Emergency sealant, thermal foam, anything to buy time? The pressure is too high. Any patch would fail immediately. Thessera's mind raced through scenarios, discarding them as quickly as they formed. Then she saw it. The coolant is following its programmed route. But if we reverse the flow direction in the secondary loop, it would create a pressure differential. The rupture would partially seal itself. Amara's eyes widened. That's insane. The pipes aren't designed for reverse flow. The stress could cause failures throughout the system. Contained failures, manageable. Unlike total atmospheric loss. How do we reverse the flow? Thesara pointed to a controlled junction 20 meters away on the far side of the chamber. Manual override. Someone has to reach it and input the reversal sequence. Through that, Amara stared at the spraying coolant, the buckling metal, the atmosphere screaming toward vacuum. That's a death sentence. Not for me. The human grabbed her arm, all four of them, her grip surprisingly strong. Wait. There has to be another way. There is not. Thesara gently removed Amara's hands. Varan physiology is more resistant to thermal extremes than human. Our skin has layers of heat-dissipating cells evolved from our desert ancestry. I can survive exposure long enough to reach the junction. Survive isn't the same as unharmed. 6,000 lives, Amara. Thesara met the human's eyes. The mathematics are simple. Mathematics don't account for whether I'm okay with watching someone die to solve them. I do not intend to die. Less surface area for the coolant to catch. I intend to run very fast, input a sequence, and return. You will be ready to execute the secondary protocols the moment I signal. She outlined the steps quickly. The manual overrides Amara would need to activate, the timing sequences, the backup procedures if something went wrong. This is crazy, Amara said, but she was already positioning herself at the nearest control terminal. This is engineering. Thesara checked her path one final time. 20 meters. 12 seconds at full sprint. 4 seconds to input the reversal code.
12 seconds back. 28 seconds in total.
The coolant spray would cause second-degree burns in 8 seconds. She would need to be very fast. Ready? She called. Amara's hands hovered over the controls. Ready. The coolant spray caught her shoulder and pain exploded through her nervous system. She didn't slow. Her legs pumped, carrying her across the buckling walkway, past the screaming processor, toward the junction. 15 meters. Her skin was blistering. She could feel it, the cellular damage spreading in real time. The Varan heat dissipation cells were working, but they had limits. 10 meters. The spray caught her again, this time across her back. She stumbled, caught herself, kept moving. She could see the junction panel, the manual override, the sequence she needed to input. 2 meters. Her fingers were shaking. The skin on her hands was turning gray, the first stage of thermal necrosis. She forced them to move, to punch in the code. 8 digits, each one an eternity. The panel beeped acknowledgement. Now! She screamed into her communicator. Across the chamber, Amara activated the secondary protocols. The coolant system shuddered. For one terrible moment, nothing happened. Then the flow reversed. The pressure differential was immediate and catastrophic. Pipes groaned. Seals burst. But the main rupture, now fighting against the reversed flow instead of being driven by it, began to stabilize. The spray lessened. The thermal stress on the processor decreased. It was working. Thesara turned to run back. Her legs collapsed. She looked down, confused. Her lower limbs were gray, the heat dissipation cells overloaded and failing. She couldn't feel them anymore. Thesara! Amara's voice crackled through the communicator. What's wrong? Minor complication, she managed. The chamber was spinning. Shock her medical training informed her clinically. Systemic trauma from thermal exposure. She tried to crawl. Her arms weren't responding correctly either. I'm coming to get you, Amara said. No, too dangerous. The processor is stabilizing. You need to monitor the systems, ensure the cascade doesn't restart. I'm not leaving you there. That is not Adam. Thesara's vision was darkening at the edges. That is not your decision, but Amara was already moving. Through the clearing spray, Thesara saw the human running toward her. Terminal abandoned, nothing but raw determination driving her forward. The human reached her and dropped to her knees. Can you stand? No. Then I'll carry you. I am considerably larger than... No. I am considerably larger than... The biomechanics were all wrong. But Amara managed it somehow, dragging Thesara's weight across the walkway, past the still dangerous processor, towards safety. They made it 5 meters before Amara's strength gave out. They collapsed together, the human breathing in ragged gasps, Thesara's vision fading. Should have left me, Thesara whispered. Shut up, Amara gasped. Just shut up and let me think. But there was nothing to think about. The processor was stable. The emergency teams would arrive soon. Amara would be fine. Thesara let her eyes close. She woke to the sterile white of the medical bay. Pain mapped her body in exquisite detail. Every nerve ending reported damage, from the severe burns across her shoulders and back to the thermal necrosis in her lower limbs. The medical bay's systems pulsed with soft light, monitoring, treating, keeping her alive. Amara sat in a chair beside the bed, asleep. Her head was tilted back against the wall, exhausted lines carved into her face. One hand rested near Thessera's, not touching, but close. "She is not left in 16 hours, a voice said. Thessera turned her head carefully. A Varen medical technician stood at the monitoring station, one of the 3 remaining Varen on the station. Her name was Kessa, and she had been avoiding Thessara as thoroughly as everyone else.
The damage? Thessera asked.
Extensive. 2nd and 3rd degree burns across 30% of your body. The heat dissipation cells in your lower limbs suffered total failure. You will recover, but Kessa hesitated. There will be scarring, significant scarring. I see. The station administrator wishes to speak with you, as does the human delegation. And Kessa's expression shifted to something unreadable. The entire engineering corps requested permission to visit. I have been denying them access because you needed rest, but they are quite insistent.
Why would they wish to visit? We saved the station. 6,000 lives.
You are being called a hero. The word sat strangely in Thessera's mind.
Heroes were celebrated, honored, welcomed, not quarantined and avoided.
Amara stirred, her eyes opening slowly. When she saw Thessara awake, relief flooded her features. You're okay, she said. I am damaged but functional. That's the most engineer response to nearly dying I've ever heard. Amara leaned forward, and Thessera saw the exhaustion in every line of her body. The processor is stable. The emergency teams got the coolant system fully operational again. Sector 7 is secure. You should be resting. I was. Right here. Amara glanced at the chair. Though I don't recommend this model for extended use. The lumbar support is terrible. Amara. Thessara forced the words out. You should not have come for me. The risk was mine to take. The human's voice was firm. You ran through fire to save 6,000 people. I ran through some residual heat to save 1. The mathematics aren't even comparable, but the contamination concerns, the social consequences, are nonsense. Amara's expression hardened. I've spent the last 16 hours making sure everyone on this station knows it, including uploading your medical records to the public database with your permission, which I'm sort of assuming you'll grant retroactively. Thessera stared. You what? With appropriate privacy redactions, of course.
But the core data is there. Every scan, every test, every verification that you carry, no infection.
I also included comparative analyses of Varen biology, the mechanisms of crimson rot transmission, and a rather scathing commentary on how institutional fear becomes institutional discrimination. Amara smiled slightly. It's been downloaded 43,000 times so far. You cannot simply override diplomatic protocol. Watch me. Amara pulled out her terminal. I also filed an official complaint with the station administration about discriminatory seating practices in common areas, submitted a proposal for mandatory training on infection prevention versus prevention theater, and may have accidentally CC'd the entire thing to the Galactic Health Organization. My fingers slipped, repeatedly. Despite the pain, despite everything, Thessera felt something warm spreading through her chest. Not hope. Something better. Something real. You have made yourself remarkably unpopular, she said quietly. Yeah, well, Amara shrugged. I've never been great at popularity contests. I'm much better at engineering contests. Speaking of which, she expanded a holographic display between them showing station infrastructure diagrams. The cooling system modifications we discussed? I'd been running simulations. If we implement them station-wide, we could increase efficiency by 12% and reduce maintenance requirements by 30%. But I need help with the biological filtration integration. The Varen systems are more sophisticated than anything I've worked with, and I keep hitting walls in the design phase. You wish to collaborate? I wish to learn. You're the expert. I'm just the engineer who's smart enough to recognize expertise when it sits down across from her at lunch. Amara tilted her head. Assuming you're interested, no pressure. You've got recovery to focus on, and I can always muddle through on my own, though the results will probably be inferior and... Yes, I would be honored to collaborate. Amara's smile could have powered the station's reactors. They worked through the afternoon. Thessera providing guidance from her medical bed while Amara's fingers flew across the terminal. Kessa interrupted periodically with treatments, her expression growing more curious each time she found them deep in technical discussions. Other visitors came. The station administrator offering formal thanks and looking profoundly uncomfortable. The Krell ambassador, who mumbled something about reconsidering diplomatic positions. Engineers from 6 different species, asking questions, offering their own expertise, treating Thessera like a colleague rather than a contaminant. The isolation that had defined 5 years of her life began to crack. "You did this," Thessera said during a quiet moment after the latest group of visitors had left. Mara looked up from her calculations. "I sat down for lunch. You saved 6,000 lives. I performed my function. You challenged a social structure. Someone had to." Amara set down the terminal. "Marcus taught me that engineering isn't just about systems. It's about seeing what needs fixing. You were being treated like a broken system when you're actually one of the most brilliant engineers I've met. That needed fixing." "By sitting beside me? It's where all good collaborations start?" Amara's expression grew serious. "But it's not just about collaboration, Thessera. It's about basic decency. You're a person, not a disease vector. You deserve to eat lunch without being treated like a biohazard. Everyone deserves that." "Not everyone believes that. Then not everyone is right." Amara pulled up a new schematic. "Now, help me figure out this thermal junction problem before I lose my mind. I've been staring at it for 3 hours and I'm starting to see equations in my sleep." They bent over the hologram together, their heads nearly touching, working through the mathematics of a problem that had nothing to do with fear or prejudice or 5 years of isolation. Just clean, pure engineering. The work continued through the following days. Thessera's recovery progressed ahead of schedule, driven by purpose as much as medicine. The collaboration with Amara expanded, pulling in other engineers, creating a working group that met daily in the refectory. At the table where Thessera had once eaten alone, the circle of empty space shrank, then disappeared. Other beings began sitting closer, drawn by the technical discussions, the problem-solving, the simple normalcy of engineers arguing about pressure differentials and thermal coefficients. 3 weeks after the Sector 7 incident, the Varen delegation requested a formal meeting. Thessera entered the conference room to find 12 Varen officials seated around the table. These were the survivors, the ones who had escaped the Crimson Rote, scattered across diplomatic posts throughout the galaxy. She had not seen most of them in years. "Queen Thessera," the senior delegate said. His name was Voron, and he had once been her chief advisor. "We have been monitoring developments on this station with great interest. I am certain you have. Your actions during the atmospheric crisis have generated significant political momentum. Several species have reached out to us expressing interest in renewed technological cooperation. The humans in particular have been quite vocal about reconsidering our quarantine status." Thessera's 4 eyes narrowed. One human. "Engineer Chen has been vocal. The rest of her species has been as cautious as everyone else. Nevertheless, opportunities are emerging. We wish to discuss how best to leverage your newfound reputation." Voron leaned forward. "The Varen people need advocates, Thessera. We need our queen to represent us, to negotiate treaties, to rebuild what we have lost." "You mean you need a symbol?" "We need hope." Thessera was quiet for a long moment. Through the conference room windows, she could see the station's central hub, where beings from 15 species moved in organized chaos. In the refectory visible below, she spotted Amara's distinctive profile surrounded by a mixed group of engineers, all gesturing animatedly at a shared hologram. "I am an engineer," Thessera said finally, "not a politician. You're both. Your bloodline, 90% of it at least." She met Voron's gaze steadily. "I carry the title of queen because someone had to, and I was the highest-ranking survivor. But I am most useful as an engineer, not a symbol." "Thessera, please. Our people need infrastructure. Medical facilities. Agricultural systems. The practical applications of survival." She gestured toward the window. "I am building those things here, in collaboration with beings from 14 other species. That is how we rebuild. Not through political maneuvering, but through demonstrating our value as engineers, as scientists, as colleagues worth working beside. You would abandon your responsibilities? I would fulfill them differently than you wish." Thessera stood. "I will remain on this station. I will continue my work, and I will be available for diplomatic consultation when needed." but I will not perform politics while abandoning engineering. The galaxy does not need another politician. It needs solutions. Amara found her an hour later standing at an observation window overlooking the station's agricultural section. "Heard you quit being queen?" the human said casually. "I did not quit. I redefined the role."
Sounds like quitting with extra steps. Amara joined her at the window. "For what it's worth, I think you made the right choice.
You're a terrible politician."
"Thank you."
"You're also a brilliant engineer, and we need you in the working group. The thermal distribution problem has gotten weird. Kessa thinks it's a biological contamination issue, but the scans are coming back clean and—"
"Amara."
"Because someone should have," she said finally. "Because all those medical scans were publicly available, and anyone who bothered to read them would know you were safe. Because I was tired of watching people choose fear over facts." She glanced at Thessera. "And because you looked really lonely, and I've been there, and it sucks. That simple? Most good things are." Amara smiled. "Also, I genuinely needed help with that filtration problem. The engineering was a bonus, but it wasn't the whole reason." They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the station's endless activity below. "The working group meets in 30 minutes, Amara said eventually. "We're testing the new thermal distribution prototype. You should be there. I should." They stayed at the window, two engineers watching the complex machinery of society functioning around them, no longer separated by fear or prejudice or invisible barriers. Just two colleagues, standing side by side ready to solve whatever problem came next, together. The mathematics of that felt perfect.